Welcome everyone to another edition to As Above, So Below Radio. I'm your host, Martin Hodgson, and it gives me great pleasure to have you tuning in today. When you get a chance, please visit the newly revamped website holisticadvocate.com. For any updates on news as well as interviews, please visit my blog. Also, take a moment to subscribe and become a member. Not only will you gain access to the commercial-free subscriber-based interviews, but also treat yourself to an assortment of fascinating people worth listening to. Today's guest is Rosemary Guiley. With more than 50 books published by major book houses, Rosemary Guiley is considered as one of the leading experts in the field of the paranormal. Having had interest in this field since childhood, her books have covered an extensive range of subjects specifically related to spirituality, the occult, and the supernatural. Join me in welcoming Rosemary as she discusses our connection with supernatural beings. First of all, Rosemary, I want to extend to you a warm welcome for being on As Above, So Below Radio. Now, before we begin, so that the audience has an understanding of what you do, would you mind telling them what inspired you to go into this fascinating field in exploring this type of phenomenon?
I've always been interested in the paranormal since I was a kid. I think a lot of kids are, and a lot of kids have psychic experiences. For me, it whetted my curiosity about what's out there that's mysterious and unknown, and why it's so strange, and why some people have very bizarre experiences, and other people not only have no experiences, they don't even believe in it. So this has been a very strong personal interest of mine. I also have been a writer since I was very young. I like to joke that I came out of the womb writing because it seems like I've been in a steady stream of writing my entire life. And I originally didn't intend to have the career that I have now, even though I had all these interests in the paranormal. I intended to write fiction, and of course there would be supernatural elements in the fiction. But I have a background as a journalist and a very strong nonfiction background. And when the market really developed for nonfiction books on the paranormal, I stepped into it and never really went back to fiction. So one thing has led to another. My pursuit of all these topics is a reflection of my varied interests, and also my understanding of the paranormal, which is that everything is interconnected. So if you're going to try and understand it from a broad perspective, you have to have at least a working knowledge in as many areas as possible, and that extends beyond the paranormal into the metaphysical. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, Martin.
Now, you've written well over 50 books covering a wide gamut of subjects related to spirituality, the occult, and even the paranormal. And you also have two websites, visionaryliving.com and jinuniverse.com, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, we have a fascinating program involving our connection with supernatural beings. So, let's talk first about the jinn. It's my understanding that the word genie is actually derived from the word jinn. So where can we speculate the knowledge of these entities originated from?
The jinn lore, and the jinn means the hidden ones. It's from an old Arabian term, and they are quite hidden. They share the planet with us. They interact with us. We've known about them since ancient times, especially in certain parts of the world, and yet, for all we know about them, they have remained mysterious and below our radar. There's a lot we still don't know about them. They are beings like us, but they have different forms. They share the planet in an interdimensional sense. They exist in a dimension that is not readily available to us, but intersects with ours, and they seem to have the ability to penetrate our reality, often at will. They, according to their lore, and their lore springs out of the ancient Middle East, out of Arabian lore and Persian lore, all of the ancient civilizations in the cradle of civilization were familiar with the jinn. And those cultures today have retained a lot of knowledge about the jinn, but they never really made it into Western lore very well for a variety of reasons. But in their own lore, in the beginning, they really had dominion over the planet. They were here before we were. And like other stories we find about beings who share the planet with us, who were here first, they gradually lost out as human beings supplanted them on the planet and became the dominant entity culture. And there are different stories as to why and how the jinn lost their dominance. They are discussed at length in the Quran. They were absorbed into the Quran. And according to that story, they were cast out because the leader of the jinn, Iblis, declined to bow to Adam when God created Adam. The angels bowed, but Iblis refused on the grounds that human beings were inferior to the jinn. And so this led to the jinn being cast from the realm. But they're still here in a different sense. Now, I became interested in them quite some time ago, actually, when I started my research and study in earnest in the occult. And I was reading about magic and sorcery and the magical traditions, and of course, the heritage going back to King Solomon and the Solomonic magic handbooks, which proliferated throughout the centuries, also said to be based on his original knowledge of and command of the spirit world, which included the jinn. Mm-hmm. And as I got deeper into paranormal investigations, I found from the very beginning that there were just odd cases that didn't make sense. We just didn't seem to have a good explanation for what was causing them. They didn't seem to be ghosts. They didn't seem to be demons. Fairies seemed unlikely. So what was going on? And many of those cases had some problems attached to them, phenomena that were very troubling to people, that was very resistant to any solution. So I studied these patterns for quite some time. I think the paranormal lends itself to patterns of activity. And it became apparent to me some years ago that the jinn are very involved in many of these cases. And when I took into consideration the jinn and their characteristics and behavior and what had consistently been said about them over millennia, suddenly a lot of cases that didn't make sense anymore made sense. And one thing's really led to another. As I've talked about them more and written about them, I've heard from people all over the world who, some of whom have knowledge about the jinn, and they say, yes, that's right, everything you've said is exactly what they do. And other people who've written in or contacted me in some other way to say, I've had situations like that myself, but what you've described, it does make sense now, and I didn't know what was going on. Mm-hmm. So we're sharing the planet with these beings, and they're not all bad, in spite of the fact that we've had some problems with them. They're like human beings, and just look around every day. We have good people, bad people, terrorists, bugs, thugs and bullies, and charity people, and healers, and teachers. So it runs the gamut, and it is that way in the jinn world as well. I have a great deal of respect for them. They are very powerful beings. They're very intelligent. Mm-hmm. Some of them don't like us very well and want to mess around with us, play tricks on us, or use us, even possess us, have some sort of involvement with them, much like we might want animals around to benefit us. And others view us more on a par. So we have quite a few dealings with them. But in terms of the paranormal, I see a very skewed end of the spectrum because usually when people come to me, they've got a problem. And that involves entities that are on the hostile side.
Just out of curiosity, with all the years of research that you've done in your writings and so forth, have you ever read the Urantia book?
I've read a good portion of it. I've never sat down and read it from start to finish. But I did do some research on it some years ago, and I read some pretty large chunks of it. It's quite an involved work and a very impressive work as well.
Yeah, because there's a chapter in the book devoted to the Lucifer rebellion, and I'm wondering if there's a tie-in between the jinn refusing to bow down to Adam and Lucifer's stand on self-assertion in defying God. There seems to be a tie-in right there.
There are some definite parallels, and even parallels with the fallen angels that we find in Christianity. We're dealing with beings who are cast out, and they're cast out usually because they've taken a stand on something, and this doesn't go down well with God, and so they're put out of their sphere and they're moved off to another sphere. Now, in the case of the jinn, there are a lot of parallels with demons because the hostile ones then who follow Iblis become dedicated to the purpose of demonstrating how inferior human beings are through temptation and through leading people astray. And it's not quite the same. It's not an exact duplicate of the satanic demon, but it's very, very similar in terms of the kinds of things that those entities would do against people. So there are similar storylines, and it is very intriguing. They're not exactly duplicates, but they do share very strong similarities.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that the jinn have an agenda? You've cited that they, in a way, masquerade themselves, such as, let's say, ETs, abducting people and so forth. So I'm, in effect, wondering if they have a similar agenda.
Well, some of them certainly do. And here again, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that they do have self-determination like human beings. And so you might find like a large group of them having a certain agenda, but you couldn't say that it applied to all of them. They're not cookie cutter entities. And so I've studied what seem to be very strong patterns of behavior. And some of them seem to have an agenda of wanting to make use of people in a vampiric sort of way, to drain off life force, to enhance their own. And some of them seem to have the agenda of really wanting to demolish human beings, perhaps for the purpose of reasserting themselves or providing more entryways back into this reality that they lost a long time ago. And of the experts that I have consulted around the globe, including, I've been very grateful that so many Muslims have come forward with their expertise and knowledge, some from a magical perspective, some spiritual, and some from even a paranormal investigation perspective. And there are even divisions among the researchers. I've talked to some who say, well, there's no uniform agenda. You've got a variety of things going on, but there's no massive jinn agenda to take over. And then others who have felt otherwise, that there is something afoot, that a substantial number of them would like to find ways to be in this reality and stay in this reality. And in the jinn connection, I do quote an English Muslim. He was originally a Christian man who converted to Islam. and is also a very good paranormal investigator too. And it's his opinion that the jinn do have that intent of coming through en masse and literally making a psychic warfare on people. How likely that's to happen in the near future, nobody really knows. The jinn have been interacting with us and from certain standpoints playing around with us ever since we've been around. So whether or not this is just kind of a chronic behavior pattern or it's building up to something, it's hard to say. But what I'm seeing is an increase in cases that I believe are related to jinn activity. And it's very difficult to try and have a demarcation between an actual increase or is it just increased awareness, increased reporting, more people coming forward? It's probably all of those things, but it does add up to a much bigger picture than most people in the Western Paranormal Investigation Society would have thought.
Mhm. Well, Rosemary, so what type of behavior or state of mind would cause the jinn to forcibly exert themselves in our lives? Would it be too much liquor, uh, drugs, hearing the wrong kind of music? I know that music is powerful because it can either uplift our emotions or even enrage us, right?
It certainly can, and there's a lot of music out there today that's very angry. And I think if more people had an awareness for the effect that sound has on physical and mental health, as well as spiritual health, they would not be listening to a lot of stuff that they do today. It's no wonder that people become aggressive after they've listened to music that is discordant and then is full of abusive and hateful lyrics on top of it. It's very dismaying what and especially young people are subjecting themselves to.
Right.
But anyway, getting back to the behavior thing, we could certainly look to what we know from demonic cases, what religion tells us about the ways that the demonic influence can creep in. And yes, when we do have excessive drug or alcohol use, that does alter people's auras. It can create tears and rips in auras that make people more vulnerable. And it can also make people more mentally and emotionally vulnerable too, because when your health gets worn down physically, you also get worn down mentally. I have found in shadow people cases, and shadow people are a form taken by jinn, that sometimes when people are going through tremendous emotional upheaval, they seem to attract these entities, and it may be just for a time. It may be something that might stick or be on and off again. Sometimes when they're past their emotional difficulty, the visitations then go away. So it seems that they take advantage of people when they're vulnerable. And then certainly we can invite them in through other vice activities like aggression, manipulation, oppression, greed, violence, and the corruption of power. So if people become corrupted through the pursuit of power, fame, or money, that can also present opportunities for all kinds of spirit attachments. And I do believe that there are opportunistic entities that kind of cruise around looking for those opportunities. And people may not even be conscious of it. It's not like, well, in some cultures, if you are trying to seize power, you would go to someone who would use magical means to help you. But you can also do it unconsciously, just by selling out to the wrong things. So those sorts of dangers really go across the board in a lot of in regard to a lot of negative entities.
So let's just say that someone makes a pact with the jinn. In effect, these could evolve into generational curses too, right?
They can under certain circumstances, and I've been told many times over, and I've certainly seen it in cases I've investigated where people have developed attachments, that the jinn are very good deal makers, and a deal is a deal, and if for some reason you don't fulfill your end of the deal, or you can't, or you decide you want out, the jinn will make certain that your family does or your descendants. So these sorts of things can follow family lines. And, what do the jinn want? Well, they don't really want money. They don't need our money. But some of them do seem to like to have attachments to people that people can't get rid of them. So it's that sort of thing. And also being able to draw off human life force energy, which seems to benefit a lot of them. Just kind of a gradual sucking off of the life force. And there are other entities who do that too. And of course, occultism is the occultism literature is full of descriptions and cases and knowledge about all kinds of parasitic entities that leech off your life force energy to the point where it deteriorates your health and can cause a lot of serious problems. So we see that in these jinn cases as well.
Now, would it be possible if the jinn or for the jinn to attack us while we're traveling in our dreams in the astral state?
Dreams can be invaded, yes, and that is a tenet of occultism, a dream invasion, and I see it in a lot of different kinds of cases. I do believe that there are many other entities out there besides the jinn who are either benign, good, or hostile. And so hostile opportunistic entities will find ways into your thoughts, your mind, your body, your energy field. And when we're sleeping, we're out there on the astral plane, and for some people, this could present more vulnerability. So there is such a thing as dream invasion, and it can be pretty serious, where people have certain kinds of nightmares, and this is part of a syndrome. Like, not every nightmare is dream invasion, and I always assure people of that. Everybody has nightmares, troubling dreams. More often than not, they are troubling dreams of a personal nature. They're not dream invasion. But when they happen with hostile entity psychic attacks, they are part of a syndrome of a lot of things going on. There would be unpleasant haunting phenomena in the house. There would perhaps be other signs of some sort of encroaching possession or influence or oppression. There would be many other things going on besides attacks through dreams.
Well, let me ask you this. Supposing, let's say, someone is feeling the presence of an unusual entity which they can discern as, let's say, the jinn. What remedies can people use in blocking out their influence to repel them? I've read that turning on the lights, television, the radio, invoking spiritual protection, daily meditation and prayer, even putting iron in one's house or putting the seal of Solomon. All these are pretty much remedies to, in effect, repel these entities. Would that be the case?
There are many remedies. None of them work 100% of the time in 100% of the cases. And with many cases, you just simply have to experiment. A lot of those remedies are superficial remedies, and if you have a superficial problem, they'll take care of it. If you don't, you have to come up with something else. So things like iron, turning on the lights, those are really superficial remedies. Many people have gotten relief with those sorts of things. If they, for example, if they've had ongoing troubling shadow person visits, I have quite a few cases where people have said, I sleep with the lights on now, and ever since I started doing that, it hasn't come back. So, as I was saying earlier, these entities are not cookie cutter beings. They have different motivations, they have different strengths, and sometimes in human life, the bully is easily deflected when you stand up to him, and sometimes it just makes him more determined to clobber you. So that's the same thing in the spirit world too. And the best defenses against any sort of invasive spirit presence are to have your own spiritual house in order. And for some people, they've neglected this for a good chunk of their lives, and then something happens for one reason or another, and they start having problems. You can't just flick a light switch and have it all go away. It may take some time and effort to really get at it. This is why so many exorcisms of all religious persuasions fail, because the host is unable to keep the entity out, or in many cases unwilling to keep the entity out. And we see the same thing in the ET abduction field, that the people who learn to eventually stop the abduction phenomenon figure out how to establish their own boundaries of sovereignty. And these are the inviolable walls around you that enable you to retain the integrity of your own space and your own life. And that's going to be different for all of us, how we go about finding those boundaries. But in general, a daily practice, a daily spiritual practice, and I've always advocated meditation because it's sort of like going to the psychic gym. It works out your aura and your spiritual muscles and strengthens your connection to the spirit realm and the positive beings and forces, as well as a connection to the divine. All of those things are strengthening for you, and just naturally repel things. We all have buffers around us, and if we didn't, all of us would be overcome all the time. So these are cases where these entities find weak points, and sometimes they find them through illness. People get worn down, so you have to get your health in order. And in some cases, it's right living. There are people who are natural attractors to all kinds of spirit activity, and they are from childhood. There's something in their energy field that it's like a beacon, and they're a beacon of subtle energy, and wherever they go, whatever's there will find them. And these people especially have to learn how to manage their aura, their energy field, so that they're not adversely impinged all the time. Fear is a major thing. If you're afraid, it makes everything worse. It just magnifies everything hugely. And sometimes it's hard not to be frightened when some of these things happen. But overcoming fear of the spirit world can go a long way too. So when investigators take on a case, or even a spiritual healer or a therapist, you have to get a context of what's going on. You have to get history, context. There's always a reason why activity starts. It doesn't start for no reason. And so you have to pinpoint the origin, the context that it's operating in, what's going on with the individual, and then prescribe a remedy. And if that doesn't work very well, then you have to shift gears and try something else. Some people will not go outside their faith. For example, a very conservative Catholic person might not want to have remedies from a Buddhist priest or a shaman or a Muslim. And so then you have to work within the confines of what someone is willing to deal with, too.
Interesting. Now, you made a fascinating tie-in with the jinn and the ETs. Have in your years of research into the subject, I know this is a far-fetched question, but I want to ask it anyway. Encountered any implication of a treaty between our U.S. government and the jinn?
I haven't uncovered any hard evidence of it, but I've had people speculate on that. Of course, people who are into conspiracy theory,
Mm-hmm.
that's a natural
Mm-hmm.
conclusion to make, that surely the government knows about all kinds of entities and is in collusion with a number of them. And it can't be ruled out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any direct evidence per se, but some of my sources from the Middle East say that, well, all the people in power, the corrupt people in power, they're all in league with the jinn because that's how they keep their power.
Mm-hmm.
So these things I think are possible, but we're really left to speculate more than anything else.
Right. Well, I'm asking because I think that it's possible that our government knows the existence of a faction among the jinn, and as a result, they're purposely wiring up a landscape with Wi-Fi, cell phone towers, and other communications devices as a means to disrupt their vibration from entering our dimension. At least that's my interpretation. Um,
They do seem to be very sensitive to EMF fields.
mhm.
And I've had some indication in cases I've investigated that they are disturbed by cell phone towers. They don't like some paranormal investigation devices that use a lot of EMF. And of course, whenever you turn the lights on, you've shifted the EMF in the room.
Mhm.
So that seems to be very it's a negative effect on some of them. Some of them, it doesn't seem to bother at all, and then others, they're out of there right away. So that's certainly a plausible scenario. No one really knows what the true form of the jinn
Mhm.
is. They were said in very ancient legend to be like the wind, to be made out of the wind. And in the explanation given in the Quran, it's smokeless fire. And so some people have speculated whether or not in modern terms smokeless fire could be a form of plasma. Bottom line is that these beings seem to shapeshift, and they can shapeshift into what feels like tangible form because people have contact with them, including sexual contact.
Mhm.
And they can disappear in an instant. They can go through walls. They can turn into smoke and dissipate. So how are they affected by the all the EMF in our world? So it could very well be that the increasing proliferation of high tech devices
Mhm.
and the amount of EMF that we're generating on a daily basis, this could be very problematic to some of them.
Interesting. Well, have you ever made any association between the jinn and the legendary Diros? For those who don't know about the Diros, these are entities that Richard Sharp Shaver claimed to have encountered living underground. He describes them as degenerate beings who kidnap surface dwellers by the thousands for meat and torture. Um, my understanding in reading about the Diros is that they harbor a strong dislike for the human race due to the fact that the Diros still believe that the earth belongs to them and that one day it will again. So there's a strong parallel there between, let's say, the Diros and the Jinn.
There certainly is, Martin, and we can find the same parallels with the fairy realm too, because just looking at Celtic fairy lore alone, they were here on the planet first and lost out to us, retreated
Mhm.
into fairyland, which in old explanations was under the ground. They were responsible for kidnapping people
Mhm.
and were well known to have a disregard for human beings and to be very unreliable. People were afraid of them because if you crossed them, they would be very vengeful, and the same thing is said about the jinn.
Mhm.
So it raises the question, are we talking about different beings, or are we talking about variations of the same being? And here again, it may be just a matter of labels and the semantics and how we explain things
Mhm.
in different places and cultures at different times in history. I've myself, I can't say that the jinn account for everything. I've certainly explored the idea. I've interviewed people, including some Middle Eastern experts, who say, you know, all these entities, including the ETs, it's all jinn. They account for everything. They just shapeshift into whatever they think people are expect, or what shape they want to take to accomplish something. But I haven't been able to make that conclusion myself
Mhm.
in my own research. I think that we have other beings that we interact with. The concept that it's just us angels and jinn, well, that's kind of mind-boggling, and that's a little difficult to take on.
Mhm.
But who knows? It might be the case. So are the Diros a type of jinn? Are the fairies a type of jinn? The paranormal is a very blurry landscape. It's not a neat little pie chart.
Mhm.
And so we simply don't know. And this is one of the things that I've been advocating to the paranormal community about learning about the jinn and taking the jinn into consideration in case investigations. The more information we collect and we collate and compare and discuss, hopefully we'll have a clearer picture of what exactly is out there and what we're dealing with.
Okay. All right. Well, let's transition here into the fairy kingdom. What can you tell us about their origins, Rosemary?
Well, the fairy, my orientation is primarily with the Celtic
Mhm.
tradition. There are
Okay.
fairies in the Middle East. The fairies are a type of jinn.
Uh-huh.
The beings called fairies, including diminutive beings who live in the natural woodlands, they're really reported in mythologies all over the world.
Mhm.
And many of the stories about them are similar, that um, they had dominion here first, and as human beings spread around the globe, they couldn't compete,
Mhm.
and they just withdrew and withdrew. Here again, we have a parallel in modern terms to interdimensionality. They literally go into another dimension. Fairyland, for example, is another dimension, whether you think you access it through a mound or down through tree roots underground. These things might just be symbolic access points for going into another dimension that then opens up like the TARDIS. You know, you're just suddenly in another landscape that's vastly different
Mhm.
from what you thought you were going to encounter. So the fairies have a lot of similarities to the jinn. They have similar powers. They shapeshift. They can fly and levitate. They have superpowers. A lot of them don't like people. Um, they kidnap people, and they become infatuated with people. They have sexual relations with people, and they have this disdain for human beings as inferior, and believe that one day the earth will be theirs again. We find these themes very consistent.
Hmm.
So again, it raises the question, what are we dealing with globally? Are we just seeing different faces of the same beings?
Would you say that as a species, they are completely independent of angels and humans?
Yes, fairies really don't have anything to do with angels, and they got lumped in with angels in part in the process of Christianizing Europe. That as Christianity spread, of course, all the pagan gods were demonized, and all these other intermediary beings that humans had in their mythologies and folklore and actual experience were devalued, and so fairies were said to be the souls of the unbaptized, especially the unbaptized children, souls of human dead who were stuck in purgatory, demonic agents, fallen angels, and things like that. When actually they're probably nothing of the sort. They have their own integrity, their own heritage, and the Victorians like to put wings on them in art. They don't have to have wings. They're more, when they appear to us, and they are shapeshifters like the Jinn, when they appear to us, they can have a variety of forms. I've seen them as lights, pillars, little people like the dwarves. I've seen them as creatures who seem to be made out of living vegetation. And yet there is a semblance of a form, and there is certainly intelligence to it. So they've been unfairly, I think, lumped in with the angels because they really have their own kingdom, so to speak, and their own path of self-determination and purpose for being here, sharing the earth with us.
Now, these entities exist in a parallel dimension to ours, or they're just invisible to our eyes and exist in our dimension?
They seem to be able to, here's my view, that they have their own world is in another dimension, but they have this access to our dimension and even a purpose in it. Most of the time they are invisible to us, and some of that seems to be by choice, being able to keep themselves invisible, and some of it is the lack of psychic faculty in the general population. If more of us had our third eyes developed, and it's very easy to do that, we could perceive these beings more often. It is my feeling that this is the earth of the future, that we are going to come into increasing awareness of our interdimensional neighbors, and we are going to have increasing interactions with them. These are not all bugs that you sweep out of the house. We have to treat them with respect, and that they have their own rights to the planet, and we have to get along with them as neighbors.
It's interesting to say this because a while back I was doing some gardening and I felt something land on my back. And this was way before I had cats. I felt something land on my back and I looked around me. I didn't see anything on my back, but the impression was pretty strong, like it was something that landed on my back, like a cat or something very small. And oftentimes I'll see my cats chasing around what appears to me like nothing, but they'll be chasing around something in the backyard. So yeah, I mean, they're around us if we just are open to them, right?
I do believe that, and if you approach these otherworldly beings with respect, and a sincere desire to have some sort of communication with them to further your knowledge, and that you're not just trying to entertain yourself, they do respond. And there are some, regardless of whether we're talking about fairies or jinn or whatever's out there, they really don't want much contact with humans. And I think they're able to keep themselves hidden. But we've certainly seen in the last few decades an increasing rapport with the fairies when you look at intentional communities like Findhorn and Perelandra and Green Hope Farm and places like that where people are working in concert with the elementals and the fairy beings to produce amazing produce, flower essences, to enhance the natural beauty and vigor of the planet. Yes, we find these beings very responsive to those kinds of partnerships.
Or would you say that, like the Jinn, that they were here first and are resentful of our presence and what we're doing to the planet?
Well, some of them certainly are,
Yeah.
and it's understandable
Uh-huh.
that if we were supplanted by another race of beings who started doing things to the planet that we found harmful or distasteful, we would have the same reaction. And so here again, it's mindfulness as human beings being mindful of what we're doing. Now, fairies and jinn who have communicated with people have sometimes commented on how our practices of building and mining and polluting are detrimental to them, and they are also upset to see what it does to the planet, which has its own consciousness, its own life force,
Hmm.
and its own energy field.
Right, even fracking, that's a major disruption for the planet itself, you know. Well, Rosemary, let me ask you this. There was a time when our ancestors had feared the fairy folk, primarily because they were very mischievous. And there's obviously, so many mythical accounts with regards to the fae kidnapping babies and substituting them for changelings. And I've also read that, if you're abducted by the Fae and partake in eating, fairy food, that you remain trapped in their domain, which kind of coincides when you think about it, with the story of Persephone being abducted by Pluto.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And she partakes of food. I think it's the pomegranate, isn't it? She eats pomegranate
Yeah, yeah.
seeds,
Hmm.
and therefore she is stuck in Hades, and she gets a reprieve to spend 6 months above and 6 months below.
Hmm.
With the fairy lore, however, it's said to be one way, and if you eat the enchanted food, then you will never return. There are other stories that the fairies won't let you return anyway.
Hmm.
And we do have the story of Reverend Kirk from Scotland
Hmm.
in the, see, was it 1600s?
Oh, 1691.
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
That he said that he visited the fairies liked him because he wanted to know about them, and they let him visit fairyland and return,
Hmm.
which is highly unusual. I've often wondered if many of the cases of missing people
Right.
could be accounted for with entity abduction or stumbling onto an interdimensional opening that's like a one-way door and
Hmm.
going through it and not being able to get back.
Or perhaps a ley line. I know that in Glastonbury, specifically at the tour in Glastonbury, there is an unusual phenomenon there in which people seem to slip into another dimension.
I've,
And
s-
they've,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and they've also witnessed what they perceive as fairies.
Yes, and Dion Fortune talked about Glastonbury being a doorway to the other world, and I've had some unusual experiences at Glastonbury myself. I've been there a number of times, and you can get into these disorientations of space and time there.
Hmm.
I think that there are other highly charged places uh, because of the earth energies where people have those sorts of experiences. And when we are spatially and time displaced, that's when we do have encounters with beings who are from other dimensions.
So let me ask you this, Rosemary. Why is there this reluctance to, for lack of a better word, accept these entities? I mean, many books have been written about the fairies, the fae. We even have like Disney making Peter Pan, where he portrays Peter Pan with Tinkerbell. Um, there's so much written about them, and yet, our modern society just pushes these entities aside excuse the pun, but fairy tales and so forth, just like mermaids. So why the reluctance to embrace these entities if more
Well,
people are seeing them, especially now?
I certainly think that cases are on the rise, and certainly the willingness of people to talk about their experiences is on the rise as well.
Hmm.
Well, I think we have a number of things going on here, and one is we live in, uh, unfortunately, an Aristotelian scientific paradigm world that if something can't be explained scientifically, then it doesn't exist. And because it does not exist on a daily basis, it's not part of our consensus reality.
Hmm.
It's not like a table is a table. And you could drive down the freeway at 50 miles an hour. Everybody does, when you're going 50 miles an hour, everybody goes, it's 50 miles an hour is 50 miles an hour.
Hmm.
So we have a consensus reality, and these experiences don't fit consensus reality. They're highly subjective, and a lot of them are spontaneous, and science is at a complete loss to explain them. So science dismisses it all as fantasy. And I don't even want to say imagination, because imagination is the faculty necessary to perceive these realms. Imagination really doesn't have any, it's not fantasy as in purely made up. It's just the ability of your mind to perceive something beyond the senses.
Hmm.
And so people were conditioned by that, consensus reality by science, and then also by religion. And many people have very strong religious beliefs where they have been conditioned to consider the spirit world to be demonic. It's not part of daily life. And if you have a problem with spirits, you should go off and consult your church authorities to have it taken care of. So it's something to be swept out of your life.
Hmm.
And we have to overcome all of these things if we're ever going to have this interdimensional Earth consensus reality. I think we're going to have it whether we want it or not. At some point, we'll just have to deal with it. But it may take a long time to develop to that point.
Well, let me ask you this, Rosemary. Is it your understanding that J.R.R. Tolkien was well aware of the existence of the Fae, of elves and so forth?
Uh, of course, I never knew him personally.
Right. Right.
Uh,
I mean, the way, I
it's
mean, if you
clear
look,
from his writings that he had to have some exceptional knowledge. And of
Mhm.
course, he said, well, he just wanted to tell good stories to entertain his children.
Right.
And I think good writers do pull from these interdimensional realms,
Mm.
and they don't necessarily realize what they're doing, but they see things as they literally are in other realities.
Hmm.
But it's my feeling that he also had a lot of knowledge about these things, and he combined his talent with his knowledge.
Hmm. It would seem so because if you read the Ring, it's chock full of information here with regard to these other entities. Okay. Well, let me ask you this: would the Fae be related to the elementals, such as the sylphs, salamanders, undines, and gnomes?
They're often lumped in with that,
Hmm.
and we have fairy lore, fairies the water, fairies the air, etc.
Right.
I think that they are separate from elementals. The elementals to me are, I want to say, more primitive energy, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but they are part of the intrinsic forces of nature.
Hmm.
And I think they operate on a different level, a collective level of consciousness that is much more removed from human consciousness than are the fairies.
Right.
But there must be some overlap too, because we do see fairies out in the natural world, and some of them explain to us that they have functions in the natural world to enhance the vitality and the vibrancy of plant life and animal life and things like that.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it's been an interesting chat, and we are approaching the end of the first hour, Rosemary. Would you care to mention to the listening audience of your websites and how anyone can reach you should they be interested in contacting you or perhaps ordering your books?
Yes, my main website is visionaryliving.com, and I have my books in a bookshop on the site. I also have a sign up for a free monthly e-newsletter called Strange Dimensions that I publish, which includes articles and reader experiences and also information about my media and lecture appearances. There's the calendar page on that website too, which has my appearances. And then there's jinuniverse.com, and that I set up as a special educational site to acquaint people, especially people in the Western world, about the jinn. And it's turned into a phenomenal discussion site. I've had people chiming in from all over the world with their experiences, their questions, and their knowledge and expertise about the jinn. Many of the experiences are rather scary because people have had negative ones. But it's a great place to learn about a lot of little-known things about the jinn, and I highly recommend that as well.
Interesting. You can also sign up for a newsletter at the visionaryliving.com website, correct?
Yes, and that's on the home page. It's called Strange Dimensions, and I have my there's a contact button there. People can reach me through either website for email. And I'm out on the road quite a bit, doing talks and lectures, and so I do like hearing about people's experiences, and it has enabled me to develop patterns, profiles of patterns, which I think help us in our understanding of these beings.
Right.
And I just urge people to take a very open-minded approach. And, the more open-minded we are and the more we are willing to learn, it benefits all of these situations.
Interesting. Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time here to chat with me for the first hour, Rosemary, and I'll see you again for the second hour.
Thank you very much, Martin. I've enjoyed it quite a bit.
Thanks again, Rosemary. Take care, and goodbye, and have a safe trip to the UK.
Thank you.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for the first hour on As Above, So Below Radio. Tune in for the second hour by purchasing a membership, and all for as little as $6.95 per month. Just log on to holisticadvocate.com and click on the subscribe button. In the second hour of this interview, Rosemary imparts information on the shadow people. Are these entities just another manifestation of the jinn? Could the often seen men in black be another form of the shadow people? Rosemary will also impart information pertaining to angels and the celebrated influence they played in our culture. And are we able to communicate with our guardian angels as well as other celestial entities, and much more? You're listening to As Above, So Below Radio.